الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Assalamu alaikum everyone. First thing first, we are going to quickly ask, what did we learn yesterday? Anyone want to say something they learned yesterday? Or what we discussed yesterday? Yes?
The conditions of having a hadith be sound.
Yeah, very good. So the first thing, because yesterday was the first halaqah, we discussed an introduction to hadith, basically, in general. And then what was the first hadith that we completed yesterday? Anyone remember? It was here. The one on intention, right? And that's obvious. Now, we know that the hadith on intention is not just the first hadith of the book of Imam al-Nawawi, it's also the first hadith of Imam al-Bukhari's Sahih as well. The first hadith he included was the hadith on intention. Now, why might they bring the hadith of intention first to start the book? Why would you start with the hadith of intention? What do you think?
Before any action, we must have intention before it.
Yeah, exactly. So even them writing their book, it's a reminder to themselves to get their intention right. It's a reminder to anyone who starts reading the book. Because you know, the book on Sahih al-Bukhari is quite a big book. And studying it is a big endeavor. So it's almost like you start with the hadith on intention. You get your intention right first, and then you continue with learning the rest of the book. So today we're going to carry on, move to the second hadith. So I'll quickly read in Arabic. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. عن عمر رضي الله عنه قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه ووضع كفيه على فخذيه وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام فقال الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت قال صدق فعجبنا له يسأله ويصدقه قال فأخبرني عن الإيمان قال أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره قال أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان قال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك قال فأخبرني عن الساعة قال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل قال فأخبرني عن أماراتها قال أن تلد الأمة ربتها وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رعاء الشاة يتطاولون في البنيان ثم انطلق فلبثت مليا ثم قال يا عمر أتدري من السائل قلت الله ورسوله أعلم قال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. So this hadith is it's quite a long hadith, and it talks about a lot of things. So let's get straight into it. So it's narrated by Umar radiallahu anhu, who was also the one who narrated the first hadith in the Nawawi, and he says, we were sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when a man came to us, and he says, "Shadidu sawad al-sha'r." Does anyone know what sha'r means? Hair, right? Not sha'r. So it says in the hadith that his hair was very black, his hair was very dark. Shadid al-bayad al-thiyab. His clothes were very white. None of us knew him. His clothes were very clean, very white. None of us knew him. Why is that strange? Yes.
No one knows. They'll assume it's a traveler.
Yeah, exactly. And if he's a traveler, he's not going to have very white clothes, is he? Actually not. They didn't have the same modes of transport as we have. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد. No signs of travel were clear on him, and none of us knew him. So there was no sign of travel. At the same time, none of us knew him. So it's a bit unusual. حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then he went to sit with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه. So he sat with him. So he was sitting. Let me show you. He was sitting like this. And his knees, he sat next to the Prophet ﷺ, so his knees were touching the knees of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, it's maybe usually the Sahaba themselves wouldn't do something like that. It seems a bit, to go and sit right next to him like that, so that his knees are touching. ووضع كفيه على فخذيه, and he put his palms on the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ. So he did that. وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. So and he told the Prophet ﷺ, tell me about Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, to believe in Allah. Islam is to and تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله, to testify the shahada. Everyone knows what the shahada is, right? Yeah. And then to وتقيم الصلاة, and to وتقيم الصلاة, and to establish the prayer, وتؤتي الزكاة, and to give the zakah. I'm sure we're all familiar with these, the 5 pillars, right? To give the zakah, to what's the next one? Usually Hajj is the 5th one. Fasting, right? Yeah. So fasting in Ramadan, what we're doing now, and then to do Hajj. And then what happened? The person who came said, Sadaq, you've spoken the truth. So Umar says, عجبنا له يسأله ويصدقه. We were surprised. Why is he asking? And then he's saying, you're right. Like, would you? In what such situation would you do that? Why would you ask someone for something and then you tell them, yeah, that's true. Like, that means that when you ask them in the first place, it's almost like you already knew. Then he goes on to say, tell me what is Iman. Tell me what is Iman. So the Prophet said, أن تؤمن بالله. Actually, can anyone tell me what are the 6 things that he said? You already answered something. Anyone else? Anyone from this side? What are the 6 things? Okay.
Is it
أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. So it's actually not just Rasul, it's Rusul. So what's the difference between Rasul and Rusul? Anyone? Rusul is the plural. So it's not just. So this is something which we need to realize. We don't just have to believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We also have to believe in Isa. We have to believe in Musa. We have to believe in Ibrahim, Nuh, Harun, and so on. I said Musa, all the prophets, right? So it's not just believing in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so Malaika. What did that mean? Angels, right? So I think we've said 4. What were the 2 that were left? Believe in the last day and Qadar. Believe in and تؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. And actually he says the good and the bad of Qadar. Believe in both. Okay, so then he said, then tell me what is ihsan. Okay, so what is ihsan? The Prophet said, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. You worship Allah as if you see Him. Just as if you can see Allah, you worship Allah to that level. فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. If you don't see Him, then indeed He sees you. You should know that He sees you. Then he said what? He said, tell me when is the hour. Or tell me about the hour. Tell me about the hour. Does anyone know what the Prophet ﷺ said?
He said that the person asking knows
not that he knows more.
the
The one who's being asked does not know any more than the one who's asking. So then he said, okay, then tell me about the signs of the hour. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, أن تلد الأمة ربتها. The slave woman will give birth to her master. وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رعاء الشاة. The Bedouins, the barefoot Bedouins, will compete in building tall towers. Does anyone know if that's something we're still waiting for? Has that already happened? Can it be interpreted to mean something that's already happened? What do we think? What did you say?
Burj Khalifa.
Yes, good. The Burj Khalifa. So those who were once Bedouins walking around barefoot have now become the ones who built the Burj Khalifa and so on. You're right. So then he went. Then he left. The man who was asking all these things, he left. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Oh Umar, do you know who that was?" And what did Umar say? He said, Allah Allah wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, what? Does anyone know? They don't know. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? So he's asked, and Umar said, you and Allah know better. What did the Prophet say? What was he? It's Jibreel, yes. He came to teach you your religion. Okay, so that's... How long have I already taken? I didn't start my stopwatch. Let's quickly go over this. So, Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Now, when we talk about Islam and Iman, what do you guys normally think? If someone were to ask you, in fact, let's say a non-Muslim were to ask you even, what's the difference between Islam and Iman? What would we say? What's the difference? Are they different? Are they the same? This is one of those things which is very important. It's an integral part of the whole thing. Islam, Iman, Ihsan. But at the same time, it's something which often we aren't so aware of. So what do we think, people? If someone asks you what's the difference between Islam and Iman? Yes?
Islam is actions.
Good.
Iman is belief.
Very good. Very good. That's more or less it. Islam is in your actions. Islam is what you physically do. Islam is, you could say, a submission and actions. While Iman is actually believing. So Iman is in the mind. Iman is the thinking, the understanding, and then the believing, if it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, then no. And then comes, then is what? Then is the submission and the actions. So which one's first? Islam or Iman? Which one's first? Iman is actually first. Good point. So there's often a misconception. People think it's like, okay, you're Muslim, and then a higher category of Muslim, like a higher level of Muslim is mu'min. But the reality is, actually, even if we look in the Quran, Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. So amanu means what? Amanu is iman. Amanu is literally the same word. It's just the verb of it. Amanu is those who have iman. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and they do good deeds. So that's the Islam part of it. So first you believe, then you submit and do good deeds. So first there's the belief in the mind, then there's the submission. And this makes sense as well, because why would you do something and then believe in it? Does that make sense, Jeffrey? Why would you do something and believe in it? And there's an interesting story here which my teacher likes to mention, and I think it's worth mentioning. Has anyone heard of Muhammad Asad? There's a story he wrote a book, The Road to Mecca. He was a Polish Jew who was actually in the concentration camps. Later in his life he was in concentration camps. He was in Germany. He was Polish. He read Surah Al-Takathur on the train. Surah Al-Takathur is the one about competing for this world. And he said this is the solution to all the world problems. This explains everything. He accepted Islam. Later what happened is he ended up in the concentration camps because he was ethnically, at least he was Jewish. He'd become Muslim. And there were some Christian missionaries who went to these camps, obviously calling people to accept Christianity. And when they met him, they were very surprised. Like, how is it a person who's Jewish going to become Muslim? Does it make sense? It didn't make sense to them. So they were asked, but he said to them, no, don't worry, it's fine. You explain to me what you've got to offer. I'll think about it. If it makes sense, then I'll accept. So they told him about Christianity. He had to think about it. And then he went back to them and he said, no, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not going to accept. So what did they say? They said, no, don't worry. You accept first, submit to Christianity, accept Christianity, and then afterwards it will make sense to you. And he said, this is exactly why I became Muslim. Because in Islam, what does Islam tell you? Islam tells you, you think about it, you understand it, it makes sense to you, then you believe in it, then you submit, then you accept Islam. First you think about it, does it make sense? Okay, it makes sense, I'm going to accept, and then I'm going to submit and do all the actions. Whereas what did these people say? They said, no. Accept first, then it will make sense. So he said, this is exactly why I became Muslim. So this is a very important point to understand, that actually Iman is first. Now you might ask, well, in the Hadith, doesn't Islam come first? Doesn't he ask about Islam first, then Iman? So the reality is, actually, there are different versions of this Hadith, because it comes with, sometimes it will come in different orders. So the more authentic version In the more authentic version, it's actually Iman first. He actually asks about Iman first. What is Iman? What is belief? Then it comes to, and what is Islam? Which is the submission and the actions and so on. Okay, so as I've shown you from the Quran as well, it very clearly shows that Iman is first, then Ihsan. So what is Ihsan? What do we think Ihsan is? How does Ihsan tie in with these things? So first there's Iman, which is believing. And by the way, suppose someone thinks about it and then it doesn't make sense to them. What do you do then? Like they thought about it, and then they think about it. Then they don't. The whole thing in Islam, it doesn't make sense to them. Then what happens? Should you try and push them to become Muslim? Should you, like, or is there a verse in the Quran which says anything about this? Can you think of a verse which says that you don't push people to La ikraha fi din, exactly. There's no compulsion in religion. So at the end of the day, with Islam, this is what happens. It's offered to people, they get the chance to think about it. If it makes sense to them, great, they become Muslim. If not, then there's no one's going to be pushed to do anything. And now there's a quick, very, very important point here. What happens if someone has Islam but they don't have Iman? What happens if someone has the submission, they have the actions, but they don't have Iman? They haven't actually believed yet. Why would that be problematic? Why would it be problematic if you have the submission, you're praying, you're fasting, you're doing everything, but you don't actually have Iman, you haven't believed yet, like you haven't thought about it, it doesn't make sense to you yet, but you're just doing it. Why would that be problematic? And can anyone think of any situations where that might happen? Any examples, like where someone might be in a position like that?
Is it because your intention was in the right place?
Yes. I mean, if you think about it, basically everyone who's born Muslim, everyone who's born into a Muslim family, until a certain point they'll be like that. You get what I mean? And that's why nowadays we see that there are actually so many people who are leaving Islam, because they never really had it in the first place. Like they were just born into a Muslim family. They were given, okay, you pray, you fast, you do this, you do that, you do this and this and this and this. But they never actually thought about themselves. And then eventually it gets to that point where they're like 20 years old or 25 years old or whatever in that university. And then they actually think about it. And then they decide it doesn't actually make sense to them, so they leave it. So the thing is, it's very problematic if we actually have Islam without having Iman, which is why, especially when people are younger, they should always be encouraged to think about it and to understand. People should be encouraged to ask questions. You know, the problem is, often there's this culture where we discourage people from asking questions. Or maybe even people are scared to ask questions. Like someone's young and then they want to ask, oh, why is this the case? Why is this the case? Why is it that we have to fast during Ramadan? Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? And the mum or dad or whoever it is just like, no, don't ask, just do it. Just do it, just do it. Especially when you're younger, this will have a very bad effect on you. Like you should get some sort of answer. Or even if that answer is just because it is Allah who's telling us to do it. So we're doing it because Allah is Allah and Allah is telling us to do it. That in itself at least is a good answer. But people should always be given answers to their questions, because if we have the actions without having the belief, that's going to be disastrous. Now what about the other way around? Can someone have Iman without having Islam? What do you think? So have you ever heard of those people who, so the time comes to prayer and they're like, okay, let's go and pray, and they're like sitting back and relaxing, like, oh, make dua for us, one day we'll come and pray. So there are some people who haven't disbelieved. They still say they're Muslim, they still say they believe, but they're not doing the actions. Or on the other hand, who's heard of Abu Jahl? You've heard of Abu Jahl. So there's a story that once in the middle of the night, the Prophet ﷺ used to pray during the night, right? Every day he used to go and listen. And a few others used to go and listen as well. In the middle of the night. They're old men. In the middle of the night, they're going to the Prophet's house, all the way to the Prophet's house to listen to him praying. Why would they be doing that? Then when they came out, they bumped into each other. And he'd be like, what are you doing here? And the others like, what are you doing here? And then they'd agree, okay, we're never going to do this again. We're never ever going to come back to his house to listen to this again. And then the next night, what happened? They bumped into each other again. So then they realized something was wrong. So one of them said to Abu Jahl, look, between us, we know that this is the truth, right? That's why we're coming to listen to him. That's why we're coming to listen to him read the Quran. We know this is the truth. So why aren't we believing? And Abu Jahl said to him, us and Banu Hashim. Does anyone know who Banu Hashim are? Who are Banu Hashim? They're basically the tribe of the Prophet. So just to explain this clearly, Abu Jahl is essentially from one tribe, and Banu Hashim is the tribe of the Prophet. He said, us and Banu Hashim, we were competing with each other like two racing horses. We would feed the pilgrims, they would feed the pilgrims. We would give in charity, they would give in charity. We would fight the best in wars, and then they would compete with us as well to fight in the wars and to lead the wars and so on. Until now they say they've got a prophet. And we can't compete with that. So even though I know that by Allah, what he's saying is the truth. I know for a fact that I can see very clearly what he's saying is the truth. I'm never going to believe in him. I'm never going to believe in him. Because if I believe in him, if we believe in him, us from the other tribe, if we believe in him, it's like we've given up that his tribe is better than our tribe. So they know very clearly that Islam is the truth. So basically, to some extent, they had iman. They had that sense of belief. They know it's the truth, but they're not going to submit. Why are they not going to submit? Because of tribal reasons. In other cases, people might not submit for other reasons. What their reasons are. In our time, people know it's the truth, but maybe they don't submit just because they're lazy. I can't be bothered to pray. I can't be bothered to fast. I can't be bothered to do this. So as you can see, if someone has Islam with no iman, that's problematic. They're basically hypocritical. If someone has iman without Islam, that's problematic because they know it's the truth, but they're not actually submitting. So you guys get it, right? You need to have both. Okay, very quickly now, what is ihsan? Ihsan is, you have iman, you have Islam. Ihsan is at the next level. Ihsan is to get even better. So the Prophet said, to worship Allah as if you see Him. Now, can we see Allah? Is it possible for us to see Allah in this life? So it's not really, it's more rhetorical, metaphorical, I'm not sure what the word is. Basically, like to encourage people is worship Allah as if you see Him. It's just to give you that sense of how good the quality of your worship should be. Worship Allah as if you see Him, because if you don't see Him, He definitely sees you. We need to understand He definitely sees us. And then we move on to, they asked about the sign. He asked about the hour. Tell me about the hour. When is the hour? And now again, very quickly on this, we sometimes focus on those things which aren't in our control. Right? There are certain things which are in our control. Like even now, we look around the Muslim world and we see, oh, this is happening here, this is happening here, everything's a disaster. But the reality is, Allah's given us power to do certain things. Like if I were to draw like a circle, Allah's given me power to do this part. I'm not doing this part, I'm just focusing on the fact that I can't do this part. You guys get what I mean? We look around the Muslim world, we think, oh, everything's a mess and whatever, but for example, who's stopping me from praying at night? Who's stopping me from getting up in the middle of the night and praying? Am I doing it? Did America stop me from doing that? Did whoever it is stop me from doing that? Nobody stopped me from doing that, right? I could do it, but I'm not doing it. I'm focused. I'm looking at things which I can't do, right? So similarly, often people puzzle over these questions. When will the day of judgment be? Is the day of judgment going to be in this many years? The day of judgment will be in this many years. Why does it matter to me why am I thinking so much about that? I should just think, what am I doing now? And in fact, there's a hadith about this as well, that a man came to the Prophet and he said, when is the hour? What did the Prophet say to him? What have you prepared for it? What have you prepared for it? And in reality, that's what we need to think about. Not when will it be, rather what have I done for it? Because the problem is, we can't do it the same way we do our exams. We can't be like, okay, when is it? Oh, it's let me check my calendar. Oh, it's this date. Okay, the night before I'll stay up all night and revise for it. We can't do that because we don't know when it's going to be. So we just have to keep preparing as if it's going to be tomorrow. Could be tomorrow. We prepare as if it's going to be tomorrow, and then we'll be in a better position. So the Prophet ﷺ actually said to him, in this hadith, he said to him, what did he say to him? Oh, I think you already mentioned. He said, the one who's being asked does not know any better than the one who's asking. None of us know. Only Allah knows that. And Allah says in the Quran as well, Inna Allah عنده علم الساعة. Allah has the knowledge of when the hour will be. Okay, finally he said, so what are the signs of the hour? And as we already went over that he said about the person giving birth to her master, and also them competing over building tall towers. And as we said, that is in a sense something which has already happened. Okay, and then he he left, and the Prophet ﷺ told him that it was Jibreel. Now you can see here also there's in a sense there's some wisdom in this, that it's a way for the people to be why does he have to come and ask the Prophet ﷺ about these things? So that the Prophet ﷺ can say it and everyone can learn. So you see now we wouldn't have known that if not for this hadith. If not for him coming and asking the Prophet and then the Prophet explaining to him, then now we know what Islam is, what Iman is, and what Ihsan is. Any questions? Or anything anyone wants to add from their own experiences? Or about Islam, Iman, Discover Islam Week, Discover Iman Week? No?
Is this ihsan different to excellence?
No, so Ihsan just means excellence, but in this case it will mean excellence in worship. Yeah. So, yeah, Okay? How long have we got left to?
6 minutes left.
No, let's stop there then. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت